The drivers around primary energy and that gap comes through of 11.2% in the first year, the operating costs of 10%. We introduced this 2% recovery on arrear debts. That has a 2.6% contribution. Then there's the international purchases. The depreciation component decreases initially, but then you have the return of going from 1.6 to 4% coming through. And then the drop in IPPs because of the lag and the delays. And then the introduction of carbon tax. And then we just take into account the current RCA decisions. What you will see in the next 2 years of this multi-year application is that, yes, the NPAs are much smaller. The operating costs and the primary energy is a 1.5% impact and OPEX 0.4. The real drivers in the second and the third year really comes from, okay, the asset base then goes from 4 to 5%, but then you see IPP starting to ramp up as they get connected to the grids, and then you see in the second year the remaining 75% of the carbon tax coming through at 3.6%. And then as we go to the last year, you will see effectively as a total, if you exclude the policy-related items, it adds up to 5.8%, and then you bring the policy item with a lot more IPBs being connected in the third year of 6.6% coming through to give us, and then with RCAs falling out with no further decisions or liquidations yet made, that then drops to 9%. So, Chair, I'm almost there, another 5 minutes. This just then expresses what it means in terms of cents per kilowatt and the different components in terms of the formula that then make up the price of electricity over the next 3 years. So, Chair, in conclusion, I think first and foremost, when we make a submission, the regulator also says your application is compliant, we receive that, and then the regulator publishes that for consultation. So we're comfortable that we've complied in terms of legislation and the MYPD methodology. I think an important factor you will see come through, as I indicated on the generation side, is meeting the demand and then picking up the delays in IPPs coming online. On overall, we believe there's about 50% of our costs that we can directly influence. Others, yes, we look to influence, but there are market conditions and parameters that also affect those costs. There's our application. At the end of the day, I think what we're looking for Eskom from this determination is, I think first and foremost, there must be mechanisms to protect vulnerable sectors, free basic electricity or inclining block tariffs, and some of it's in the domain of the regulator, some of it's in the domain of government. Secondly, to be sustainable and to deliver on the operational needs, the changing and the growth in the infrastructure, as we also transition in terms of this industry technologically and also migrating from coal to introducing many more renewables and clean technology. You need a sustainable Eskom going forward financially, not to be reliant and a burden to the fiscus. So it's important that government addresses this pressure point of the municipal debt of the 90 billion rand, and we need to be in a position where we don't go back through the shareholder to government and national treasury and ask them to add more to the 500 billion. That is not sustainable. What it ultimately comes down to, chairperson, members and the public, we need to decide, are you going to pay for these efficient costs and that return on assets, either through the electricity tariff or as the taxpayer? What is the most efficient mechanism to deal with this? But in doing that, you must also have mechanisms to affect affordability of the vulnerable sectors and of the vulnerable residential consumers. Chair, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasim, for the comprehensive presentation. I think it was necessary so that...
All right, so just a sense of the situation as it unfolds there in Cape Town for you. NERSA, of course, kicking off their public hearings, much anticipated in some respects, especially when you consider how much is at stake here. Of course, Eskom has applied for a 36% electricity increase from next year, and as prescribed by the country's laws, in order to see that through, comments need to be garnered from a whole range of stakeholders, including the public, and that's part of that process we're seeing unfolding there for you. There's talks around having to find mechanisms to protect the most vulnerable people in our country. Of course, 36% is quite a big jump from the current electricity tariffs, which are unaffordable for some people already. There's also talks around migrating from coal. Of course, there's been a lot of discussions around the just energy transition to that effect, and ensuring that that migration leaves a sustainable Eskom in place, one that doesn't rely on the fiscus. There's concerns that part of what's taking place in the form of this electricity tariff hike is the cost being passed on to ordinary consumers. And of course, that's certainly not favorable, especially for a lot of people who are indebted already in this country. There was also mention there of the 90 billion rand that municipalities owe Eskom, something that the electricity minister mentioned, I think it was about last week or so, when he spoke about that as he tried to mediate between that dispute between Eskom and the city of Johannesburg around the money that's owed there. So there's a lot to be considered. Once again, the hearings are starting in the Western Cape, but they are meant to hit all 9 provinces, and we'll certainly keep watching that process for you to get your sense of how it unfolds.